bienvenidos al ciclo de entrevistas de Fundación Hypatia, el ciclo de entrevistas Redes Virtuosas que llevamos haciendo ya por 9 años consecutivos y que en esta ocasión queremos agradecer al Tecnológico de Monterrey por ofrecernos este precioso espacio, el espacio de reflexión para hacer esta entrevista. También muy especialmente agradecer a Inés Sáenz, a Enrique Tamés, a Pablo Ayala y a Paloma Lerma por permitirnos estar aquí en este espacio tan sagrado y tan especial que han construido en el Tecnológico de Monterrey. Y bueno, tenemos una entrevistada maravillosa hoy día, que ella es Rama Mani. Ella es una líder para la transformación y constructora de la paz. Poeta y artista dramática, fue galardonada con el premio Peter Becker en el 2013 y con el premio Excellence Leadership del Global Thinkers Forum por sus contribuciones a la paz global. Es fundadora también de la Academia del Teatro de la Transformación y del programa Enacting Global Transformation de la Universidad de Oxford y consejera del World Future Council. Además, es cofundadora con Alexander Schiffer de la organización Home for Humanity, una red de centros de regeneración a lo largo de todo el globo y a lo ancho, y comunidades que están trabajando por el desarrollo de una nueva conciencia ecosistémica y transformadora de la persona, de las comunidades y de la tierra. Así que muy bienvenida, Rama, muy bienvenida. Qué felicidad que estés aquí con nosotros en el Tecnológico de Monterrey, en México, que hayan venido desde Francia con Alexander. Y estamos demasiado contentos, very, very happy. We are so happy you are here in Tecnológico de Monterrey with us and with Fundación Hypatia. And how are you?
Feeling so good to be in this extraordinary country, a country which has given so much to humanity, to the world, with its rich civilization, with its rich culture and wisdom, but also because this is the country where you grew up.
Yes.
And so it means a lot that we are together here with these extraordinary students and professors and leaders of Monterrey Tech.
Yes, it has been such an experience. Okay, Rama, so we want to know everything about you. Okay, so the first question always in Hypatia is about childhood, that we think it's such a special moment, inspirational moment for our whole life and the source of our flourishing. And I would like to know about your childhood. Where did you born? Where did you grow up? Your parents, your context, and your beautiful country, India, and how this influence what you become, as a leader.
Yes, I love it that you start from the very beginning. That's very sacred and precious. And the first thing that comes to mind when you ask that question is even the circumstances of my birth. So for Indian parents, like in many other parts of the world, they are longing for a son. And what was quite interesting is my parents had a first son, they were very happy, but they longed for a daughter. Both my mother, who is the youngest of 5 children, and my father, who is the oldest of 8 children, they were very committed, especially my father, only 2 children, but they both longed to have a daughter. And they celebrated when I was born. Even today in India, when a daughter is born, the family mourns. Oh no, it's a daughter. What a burden it will be for life. Even though they know that in India, as in many other places, it's the daughter who takes care of the parents in the end, even though the tradition requires the son to do that. So it was a beautiful thing. My mother tells me that when the nurses came to tell her, "You've had a daughter," and everyone burst into joy and celebration, the hospital staff couldn't believe it. And so that was for me my welcome into the world. And that's shaped me in so many ways, because that unconditional love of my parents. And I think the second thing that really shaped me was having a father who, despite being an Indian man, where there's a lot of machismo, I know that's also a factor in this part of the world. We share that in common. We share many things with Mexico and South America, and that's one. That my father's, from his childhood, he had 5 sisters, and for him, the independence of women, intellectual independence, financial independence, moral independence, was absolutely critical. So those were really factors that shaped my childhood, and in a way gave me no choice. I had to be a woman who would work for the benefit of others and be independent.
And which things from your father and from your mother do you think are the biggest lessons, like that you brought, you have in your heart?
I would have to start with my grandmother, because I think that's the greatest source. I can now see that my mother embodies that quality, and it's so much in me. But from my grandmother was this unconditional love and compassion just flowing out of her, and it just radiated in waves like these ripples that we can see in this extraordinary center of reflection in Monterey Tech. And it was a reference point for me and for all of us growing up, that you could, whenever there was something difficult, you could turn to this well of unconditional love and somehow know everything would be okay. And it had a spiritual core, and at the same time it was not limited to her religion or practice. It was so big. And I feel the same now with my mother, and I can feel that that was really a turning point for me when I could feel that in myself. So that was probably the first thing I would call. And about my parents, what I really love, which shaped me so much, was we come from what is, in India we have the caste system. Mm-hmm. And my parents and our family belongs to what is called the highest caste, which does not mean economically that we are the most prosperous, but we are the caste that has the responsibility for knowledge and wisdom, but also the responsibility to be like the priests, the bridge between society and the spiritual world. Sadly, even though often the Brahmins were quite modest, they were the teachers. They were the ones like Aristotle who would prepare the kings and the youth. They would teach the youth. But sadly, in some cases, the Brahmins abused the fact that they were the only ones who had access to knowledge. Mm-hmm. And this became really a source of disequilibrium. And what I love about my parents was, even though they came from this tradition, and my grandparents really observed all of the traditions of Brahmanism, the spiritual traditions, and therefore even practiced the caste system, though not in a violent way, but they believed in it. But my parents were so, from the beginning, open-minded and did everything possible to create inclusion. Our home was the place where friendships happened, where people from different backgrounds who had been living in the same apartment building, never even knowing each other's names or talking to each other, entering an elevator where they are next to each other but didn't smile. The moment we came to that building, my mother made sure that everyone met together, and we celebrated Christmas and Eid and Diwali and Parsi festivals as a family across social divides, economic divides, religious divides. And that was a key for me growing up.
Wonderful. What a wonderful childhood. That's amazing. Okay, and then how did you decide what to study? And where did you go to college?
It wasn't even so much the studying part, but it was really growing up in India. What did I want to do with my life? Mm-hmm. And in India, what broke my heart was this incredible country, like Mexico, with so much culture, so much richness, and such humanity in the people. I just fell in love with everyone I would meet, and I would often be drawn to those people who came. We were very, I would say our family background is very humble. My father had become an engineer and then worked for a company, so we lived decently. At that time, salaries were very small. It would be probably, $50 or something. But with that, we lived well as a middle-class family. But I was always drawn from a very young age to working with the children on the street, with people who had nothing, and with becoming very close to them, with bringing them home, hearing their stories, like Hypatia, this passion for people's stories, and how did people who had gone through so much struggle remain so human, so deep, so loving, so spiritual in a way. And so my real passion was just creating a society of justice and believing that we could bring about transformation of human beings who acted in ways which they had lost their humanity, and they didn't realize that their normal behavior was inhumane. They thought it was normal to treat other people with inhumanity and brutality, but to change the systems, because the systems normalize injustice and treating each other that way. So this real realization, we need this personal transformation, but we need the societal transformation. So my feeling at that time was, well, actually there were three. I need to be a journalist to write about it, so like you. I need to be a lawyer to fight for justice in the courts, but I have to enter politics, and people like us who really care about transformation have to also take on that task, because otherwise only the corrupt and those who want power will go into politics, and then we will continue like this. So at that point, that was my thinking. And so it was then the time when undergraduates were also going abroad to study. And so I actually, though I loved India so much and never thought I would leave, I went to the US with a very generous scholarship, because at that time it would have been impossible to even buy a ticket to go to the US. I got my first passport, a week before my 18th birthday, with the first visa stamp to travel to the US. And I studied political science and international relations because of this desire to bring about change.
Okay, and then you went to Italy also?
Yes, so in the US, interestingly, I was studying at a university called Bryn Mawr College, which was at the time where women were not given education in the big famous institutions. They created these smaller colleges for women who really wanted to pursue an education. So like Katharine Hepburn went to Bryn Mawr College. It was this place for really women who wanted to bring about change. And can I mention one thing which was very important for me in the US, was initially I remember feeling very dépaysée, like not at home. Because I felt in this rich society, none of the things I care about, the issues of social justice, the issues of gender justice mattered, because they had everything. They had their gender justice, they had their social justice. But one thing was realizing already in my first year that no, there were such profound issues of justice here, that the gender justice issue wasn't one, that there were so many people living on the streets, so social justice wasn't one. And there were so many issues like the struggle for justice and against the dictatorships then in South America, so getting so involved in these protests for peace, for protests for justice across the world. So that was very important for me. And what that led to was I fell in love with South America and Latin America. And my undergraduate thesis then became about, because of my love for Latin America, the whole transition from dictatorships to democracy, and how civil society, the mothers, the ordinary people came to fight against these dictatorships and military rule, and that was what brought about the transformation. So the beauty was I was so inspired by this continent where ordinary people with just the love of their hearts, their love for each other and community, brought about a whole new possibility of civic freedom and a real meaning of democracy. So that was very important for me over here.
And how interesting that you come from India to the United States and you connect with Latin America and not with the United States. What was lacking United States that you, instead of focusing in their issues or Indian issues, you focus in Latin America?
Yeah. What I would probably say is a lot of my extracurricular activities were focused on American issues. So for example, all of the protests, we were talking about like the Contra Nicaragua issue, American aid to the Contras, all of the issues for freedom around the world, for disarmament, for peace. Also, and for against homelessness, working with the homeless, doing a lot of social service. As well as, I remember in the last 2 years of university, the race issues. You look at the Floyd movement today, my God, already I'm talking about
Which years was it?
Yes, 1985 to 89, because that was the time of the transitions, the first, in Argentina especially, and Chile and all of that time. But that was also the time where racism and sexual violence, it was extraordinary that men, well-educated, from the middle class, were acknowledging, my God, we thought we had controlled this, animal feeling, but we recognize that domestic violence, violence against our sexual partners, is still a part of us. So that was a big issue. And racism even in these institutions where we should have worked on this and evolved through it. So that became very important. So that was my extracurricular life, where I was passionately involved in these movements within the university and between universities to transform the social fabric of society. But in terms of my studies, it was about how best can I use this to prepare myself to work on justice. So that was what really drew me, and it was always this feeling that academics can't be something like this academic choice from your mind. It has to be what your heart calls forward, and that was what my heart called forward. I could relate to this, the success story. Maybe Latin America could teach me what to do in India and other parts of the world where we hadn't managed, where the ordinary people hadn't managed to liberate, to bring down, like Gandhi did, you bring down a power much bigger than you, and you as ordinary people become the leaders.
Yes.
So Allende, for example, was a great hero and a great inspiration.
Yes. And then you go to Italy and you go to UK. Tell me about what you did in those countries.
I will put a little interim between my it was after my master's, yes.
Okay.
There were 2 important little passages in between my undergraduate and master's studies, which was actually very beautiful and very pertinent to what's happening now, because I was very fortunate to receive a scholarship, and I really encourage young people, we don't yet know what to study as a master's, it's too early, we don't get jobs because we don't have the experience. So I was fortunate to get this fellowship, where we, applying for the fellowship, could decide what is the project we want to work on. And I was already very interested in how human beings have, from the beginning of time, on the one hand been nomads, always moving, with our animals or with our bag, with our feet on the earth, but we've also settled. So my project was human beings as nomads, and I looked at the relationship that happens between countries where people are forced to leave because of colonization, because of what happened to us economically, because our rich cultures were destroyed in these millennia, or these hundreds of years of colonization. And we became immigrants in the very countries which colonized us, and all of the relationships between these 2 places. And I became drawn to France and the relationship with the former colonies of Algeria, Morocco, Tunisia, but especially Algeria. Why? Not surprising, because Algeria had taken inspiration from Latin America, and the women and the ordinary people were leading the first Arab Spring, demanding democracy and demanding women's rights. So I landed up on the streets of Algeria fighting for freedom with my Algerian brothers and sisters and fighting for women's rights. But at the same time, looking at the relationship between the immigrants who are forced to leave, what happens to their families that are left behind. Like we know this so well in our societies, these societies where it's only women because all the men have had to go to look for work, but then they come to this former colony and they are treated as underdogs, and the relationships in that society. And that was very, very interesting, because it was not a fellowship, it was academic, it was really living with the people, living in the villages, living in the communities of the immigrants, and imbibing their lives. And now when we look at how immigration and refugees has become so much more aggravated, I'm grateful that I had that time to really get into the skin of those issues and to see how our struggles for freedom, we've almost got there, but why is it that we still get turned back when this movement comes from the people to say we want freedom, we want genuine democracy? us making the decisions, you know. And that was between my undergraduate and my master's studies in Italy, where I studied international relations. A lot to say over there, but I'll probably jump to the next part, which was between my master's and my PhD. Should I mention that, which is very relevant to your topic of the whole? So what was fascinating was that was the time while I was studying, I started my master's when, for a lot of young people studying now, they would have forgotten there was something like the Cold War, which shaped so much of our lives. And that was exactly when the Cold War ended. But we had not prepared for it. Neither academics, nor political leaders, nor civil society. We just didn't know what to do. And that was a very important time of rethinking who we are as human beings. And I was very fortunate because, again, amazing chance that my master's thesis was about a great man, the theories of a great economist who won the Nobel Prize, Amartya Sen, who was talking about the economics of freedom. And he, through writing about him, meeting him briefly, I was recommended to work for a global commission called the Commission on Global Governance. And we were inventing the term global governance then. It didn't exist. Mm-hmm. And that was also what brought me the first time to Mexico. And it was really world leaders from every part of the world, including a few civil society leaders like Wangari Maathai, saying, how do we redesign our world to put global ethics, a key feature of Hypatia? How do we have a world where global ethics, not religion, not spirituality, not human rights, it goes beyond, is at the center of everything we do? And then if we design global governance, from security institutions, the Security Council, our economic systems, everything based on global ethics. And the first line of our report, which was presented on the 50th anniversary of the United Nations, and simultaneously to the World Economic Forum, to economic leaders, to say, recognize that this generation is defined by the power of the people of civil society. Imagine this was 1995.
Huge change, yes, of mindset, huge change of mindset.
Yeah, and I feel sad because we had done that in 92 to 95, and in 95 we thought the new world could begin. A world that was led by global ethics and civil society, redefining a new global governance, not state, we said sovereignty is over, state sovereignty is finished, and these were former ministers, prime ministers who were saying state sovereignty is over.
Okay, this is a very interesting subject because this is the dilemma, no? This is a great idea, no? To have a global ethic governance, but we need a very, very high state of consciousness to do this and not, because who is going to define this global ethics and who is going to decide the laws so what do you feel today after all this time and all this global transformation, globalization that is very criticized today because of the use of power, through these institutions that make these global determinations, politics, etc. But sometimes people feel that they don't have the enough consciousness to respect the differences, the local realities, and they impose these systems or in different aspects. So what do you think about that? What is the balance between a global and holistic view and the freedom of people in their own communities, in their own way of life, beliefs, spirituality, etc.?
You're touching at the heart of what has really been exactly a passion of mine, is how can we have, on the one hand, a very inclusive way, drawing on diverse cultural, indigenous traditions and backgrounds, so everyone can feel a sense of belonging and co-creation of whatever we want to call it, global ethics, global values. At the same time, have profound respect, because we are living in a world where there are some ancient indigenous groups and cultures which have been reduced through, the continuing of globalization, there may be only 10,000 left, but if those people's language and culture is erased, we are losing part of our human heritage, our universal heritage. So how can we do the two? And I feel where we have come, for example, I feel the Earth Charter did that really well because it was a much more inclusive process than, for example, the human rights.
Yes.
Human rights were still, by some people, felt to not be inclusive enough, and that's why we had to add on. But you can have a way that you could define some values as being genuinely inclusive, especially today, if, again, like Hypatia, they're based on the underlying interconnectedness of life, the wholeness of life, and the underlying unity, which then is completely scientifically based. It has been proven by frontier science across all the sciences, from cosmology, astronomy, evolutionary biology, quantum physics, etc. So it's undeniable, and yet it's what all of the ancient cultural, spiritual traditions have been saying. So if it's based on that holistic view of life, it is all-inclusive, and then it can be very simple. In 3, 4, 5 lines, you can say a few values which are universal. And give space for all the cultural diversity. So it has to respect the underlying unity and respect the infinite diversity of life, of the biodiversity, and the cultural diversity that cannot be limited to human beings. It can't be only about cultural diversity. It has to be about the family of life, which is indivisible between human beings and other forms.
Okay, I want to go to which awakenings or inner transformations in this process, I don't know if it was in your youth or adolescence or in adulthood, which were the more important inner experiences that transform your consciousness, no? Because sometimes we believe that we only grow through knowledge, in universities or, traveling around the world, but what we really we learn from sometimes for difficult moments or transition moments. Or how was your experience? How were your experiences in that realm?
It's so beautiful, your questions. I have to start, there were these different steps because my first access point was growing up in India. I could feel I didn't know the word spirituality, but I could feel like my grandmother, this extraordinary source of compassion, and I could feel how children on the streets or elderly who were close to death with whom I worked felt drawn to me, or blind children with whom I worked felt drawn to me and felt the sense of being at home with me. And yet I had such a rejection for religion because of the caste system, and what I saw was the negative side. But my interesting first experience of spirituality was when I had to leave home. My mother and I were like twins, and I didn't know how my mother would survive. And that was when I discovered not the religion, but the philosophical, the metaphysical aspect of Hinduism, which is detached love, that you can love with all your heart but not be attached. So I started studying with a beautiful teacher, the philosophy, the metaphysics, to help my mother to cope with my going away. But the sad thing was when I reached America, because the US then was so secular, I had to hide my culture and my spirituality, and I became distanced from it. And I lost what had given me my connection to my core. And I have to say, I feel good sharing this with you, Aleka, because of the kinds of things that Hypatia focuses on. Because many of us, and young people, we lose that connection with our culture because we feel we have to fit in. And I became only focused on the outer change, and I became like an alpha male. I had all the answers for what others had to do, and I was moving more and more away from who is my core, who am I? And thank God, I'm so grateful. It was while I had gone to the limit of the linear, the left brain, my PhD was coming to an end. It was at the University of Oxford. I did it very fast in 3 years, and it was about how do you restore justice after genocide, dictatorship, war crimes, drawing lessons from Latin America, because that was the only continent that had done it. And I had broadened the field to say it's not just about trials and truth commissions. It has to be about socioeconomic justice. Because if you repress people, you repress minorities, you repress indigenous groups, what else can they do at some point? You know? And it's never the poor who rise up, it's the powerful who crush them. And we always think, oh, it's the poor who create violence. No. The violence is created by the rich, powerful who try to repress the movements for change everywhere in the world. And at that point, and I've brought in the cultural aspect, that without culture we can't restore justice. But luckily for me, 6 months before I was completing my PhD, I had the hugest awakening. And
how this happened?
I can't explain. It was a gift from the universe. I felt unwell. I just couldn't get out of my seat and go to my office in the University Department of Social Sciences. And I didn't have fever. I just couldn't get out of bed. And by chance, I picked out a book which had been lent to us by friends. And they had said, oh, Rama is so against spirituality and religion, you know, just keep it away from her. God knows how my hands came to it. And I read it and was talking about how if you want to bring about change, the change is inside. It was written by a Tibetan Buddhist teacher. And I read this book talking about the heart, your subject, the heart of compassion. And I wept because I knew this was me and who had I become. Actually, I didn't want to see the perpetrators in jail for the rest of their lives, being beaten and flogged and tortured the way they had tortured people fighting for freedom. I wanted them to transform. And I realized if I wanted them to transform, I had to start in here. I had to be, an exemplar, an embodiment of the change I wanted to see in others and in society. And that was the biggest change, which reshaped everything in my life.
Okay. So, how do you incorporate that? But let's still with the story of your after this your experiences of peace building. No, you work in justice, and how these two things, no, this awakening of your inner transformation and your work in justice and peace building develop. Yes.
So I had become so deeply involved in justice, and I was fortunate that my first job, seeing how can we do this in real life, was in Africa, working for a very big non-governmental organization called Oxfam. But they were focusing on the technical help. Okay, there are all these countries where there are humanitarian crises and war. How do we give them water? How do we build sanitation? And they realized we need to understand how to deal with conflict. So I was the first conflict advisor, policy coordinator, starting with the Horn of Africa and then working across African conflicts. And what really was a gift was, on the one hand, I would be in all these international conferences of the decision makers, you know, the diplomats, the UN officials, the political leaders, where civil society, if they were lucky, would have 1 minute to speak, but they made all the decisions in their suits. And even if they were African traditional leaders, they were wearing Western suits, you know, very few women and so on. But then I would go to the communities, which were actually destroyed by war. And I realized that there was where something was happening, you know? That was where they had to deal with it. This decision-making and humanitarian aid was not going to come to their villages, because their villages were cut off. And that was where I got the lessons, and I began to feel something is wrong. And that led actually to my second huge awakening. In the middle of the night, after this during this very intensive peace mission in Somalia, we had gone to different places to see how can we be intervening there, and we were writing up our report. We would work till very late, at 2 o'clock at night. Then the generator would go off because there's no electricity in these countries, just this, you know, using up fuel. It was terrible ecologically. And lying under my mosquito net in the dark, it was like this beautiful space here. I had no clue what it was, but I started writing in the dark, and it was the big awakening that you need art, the power of art. Why? Because we get stuck, especially decision makers and leaders, in the old ways of doing things over and over again. So those who create the problem think they're going to solve it, but they can't think outside the box. And art is what enables us to reimagine. We can heal the past, my topic of justice. We can deal with the present, but we can imagine the future and create it.
And you weren't involved in anything of arts till then? Zero?
I was the most unartistic, being an Indian who should be able to dance and sing, and I was zero in the arts. So
I cannot believe that. And how did you went to drama classes or?
Never.
No.
Never. So in the beginning when this happened, I said, okay, this vision must have been meant for someone else's mosquito net. So there were two things which was very interesting. One was the art, and the second part was create a space somewhere in nature where people of all different backgrounds and cultures, all different social classes, all different disciplines, so not all political scientists, please, not all economists, the philosophers, the artists, the architects, the scientists, they could all sit together and be in nature, be with the silence and sounds of nature, be with their inner silence, and reimagine the future and create it together.
That's what your insight.
It was a vision, nothing to do with me. It didn't come from me. I didn't have the brain capacity. I didn't have the brain capacity to think of this. It fell into me, these two parts. Art has the power to transform the world, and it needs these spaces where we can come together and reimagine the future and create it. And those then became the defining part. First the art, and then the space. They actually started together, but that was the importance they took. But in the beginning, when this came in and I said, I'm not an artist, so I did what I knew best. I was like, okay, how can I meet artists and ask them, like you do, what is your life story? What is this art thing? And I realized I wasn't interested in the big artists in the galleries, but the community artists in situations of crisis. How do they help people to express their sorrow and imagine the future? And that's what became really, my way in to what happened next.
Wow. So you are also the founder of the Theater of Transformation Academy, no? And how did you create all these and get all these to Oxford and convince them of these? Because when you say, no, I give classes to these leaders in the UN about the Theater of Transformation, it's like, wow, I mean, do they do this? How do you create this? And what did you do with this?
Yes. Mm-hmm. So I have to say it was a long process because the vision I had was in June 2000. Okay? Mm-hmm. And then there were many things that happened. A lot of work on the one hand with political leaders, working with them on transformation in an academic policy way, working in different countries like in Sri Lanka as the head of the main organization there, working on policy transformation in the country, which was a very challenging experience where I almost died, but lucky to have survived. And it was only in 2013 where after all these years since 2000 of each country in conflict I went to, after my official policy political work, going to the communities and meeting these artists and talking to people about their life stories like you're doing, what brought about your change, what was your turning point, that I got into their skin, and completely out of the blue in 2013, while we were creating this movement called Rising Women, Rising World, with two of your great friends, Scylla Elworthy and Jean Houston, one of my very close colleagues with whom I've done many boards, Foundation for the Future, etc. together, she took me to actually Palestine and meeting the people there. When I came back to Oxford, where I'd been a research associate doing many projects on the role of art and culture and spirituality in how to prevent genocide and mass atrocities and how to rebuild peace. And in a meeting when I was asked, how was your peace mission? The stories of the people I met came out. So even with this, every big thing that's happened in my life has not come out of my head, which is full of maybe a lot of knowledge, but it's really come from from outside, from some bigger intuition. And little by little, so immediately then we had a meeting of Rising Women, Rising World in the US, in Ashland, where our co-founder, Jean Houston, very beloved friend and extraordinary world leader who has really created so much in this world. She organized my first concert, and I said, I don't know what a concert is. I'm not an artist.
She organized your first concert?
In the middle of our Rising Women, Rising World meeting, bringing all the leading personalities and artists of this artistic capital in Oregon together, and I gave my first performance, not knowing how to perform. And people said that was a Woodstock moment that they would never forget in their lives. And I thought, this is really strange. And so I think art taught me. And little by little over time, I began to enact hundreds of stories of people from age 8 to age 100. So the oldest person whose story I've enacted, this was age 100. Very important, one of the first stories, a woman who survived the Holocaust and became a Zen master and discovered that we need to heal the past, otherwise we get caught in circles with no exit. That when we find our inner power and we find our inner peace, then we can bring harmony to the world. And this really comes to me all the time when I see conflicts, you know. So enacting these stories and seeing how did people who are caught in horrible situations find their inner transformation, and through that power within, they were able to transform the world. And this was really what was the birth of the methodology of theatre of transformation, which, as you said, I could then use from grassroots freedom fighters and grassroots activists up to the most senior political leaders in my academic and political work, and with government and with business leaders as well.
And you have you have done this in different places. Well, we did it here in Tecnológico de Monterrey yesterday with the leaders of the Tecnológico de Monterrey. In which other places have you done this? And what have you seen in them? Like how do they transform through this experience? What happened with theater? What happened with this enacting the life of other people? Because this is something very deep, you know, from theater, from play. The philosophers talk about very much, you know, about the gods and the people and the relationship between who is the theater and which is the essence and which is the personality. So what happens with this methodology? Why do you think it's more effective to connect in the heart the real problems, to really feel them, not just knowing them, no, in the mind?
Yeah. You've actually given all the answers and the power of your question. But I had to find them out. I had to find each of the parts of your question. I had to discover it by doing. And that was, you know, it was the El Camino se hace caminando, no? So that was really my life, that there was zero I knew. And each step taught me. So first, I had to literally enact the lives of hundreds of people before I realized, there is a methodology in this. Because the body taught me. When I had enacted so many people who were still caught in suffering, I realized my body was leading me to focus on those people who didn't get stuck in the suffering, but did this process of transformation. And then I went into that. I only started enacting, embodying. So I don't, even today, you give me a script of the best contemporary playwright or anyone from Shakespeare or, you know, as cellist till today, I don't know how to do regular theatre. I don't know how to rehearse and, you know, follow a director. Because in my theatre, I'm the director, I'm the scriptwriter, I'm the actor, I'm the decor manager.
So you improvise all that because your memory is amazing. The quality of the information and detail of the information. It's like you are like, you know, I don't know if you are possessed or is this a memory process, but how is it? Yes.
So in the beginning, when I didn't know, I would actually keep the script so that I had exactly their words, you know, and it would be lying somewhere. In the beginning, it was like this, like the notes of Then I would keep it on the floor, so if I forget. But little by little, these 100 people, maybe, I think I counted once, maybe about 35 countries, and in each performance, I made sure that there would always be stories from Latin America, so from Peru, from Guatemala, from Brazil, from Argentina, from all the countries where, not Argentina because I haven't yet done that because I haven't yet been there, despite my strong connection, but every country I've been to, from Africa, from the Middle East, so we could feel the universality of humanity, that this is not only somewhere, this is universal. But little by little, it really became that I feel that because I had connected to the soul of these people and to the depth of their story, the essence, I could step into their essence. That was really what it was. And as I did it more and more, I realized there is this process that even though the people I'm enacting are of such different backgrounds, ages, cultures, circumstances, every story is unique, and yet the process I saw that leads us out of getting caught in this vicious cycle, that Vera Schiller-de-Cohen had taught me about her life story of going from being a victim till the age of 50, stuck in the suffering and frozen to liberating. That there is this process. Should I mention that briefly, or should
yes,
we? Yes. So what the process that I discovered is that you can get stuck in the circle, but at one point, life is always is knocking on the door. But we are so caught in our situation, whether we are fighting for freedom or busy with work or trying to change the world or just suffering, we don't hear the knock. But the minute we hear the knock, it's like a window opens. And we can look through that window, and it's the same reality. The bombs are falling. Mm-hmm. My suffering is the same, but I look at it with new eyes, and I call that witnessing reality. And the moment, that's like that moment of awakening, the moment I do that, wow, I say yes. Not that, I can't do anything, I've tried everything, they will never change. We externalize the problem. They will always treat me like this. And when that witness reality hope opens, it's like we get the wings of possibility. And that second step is awakening possibility. And that's where we see this creative flourishing. I suddenly become an artist who is, doing theater, whereas I'm the zero creative person in my life. And we see people doing impossible things. They become like little Mother Teresa, like zoom, So this creative possibilities, awakening possibility, and we tap our creative power. It could be artistic, but it could simply be our true human potential. Mm-hmm. And that leads us to the third stage, which is envisioning change. But we realize in in everything we do, we are told, keep the vision 10 years in the future, and the vision is out there. Actually, the vision is in here. We need to become the vision, like Gandhi and Mandela said. Mm-hmm. We need to break the stones till we become so humble and so filled with the vision that our ego disappears, our old notions disappear. And then when we come out, it's almost like we don't need to speak because we are the vision. And that's when the last thing happens, the enacting transformation. That we attract the allies because transformation only happens collectively. And we become this force for change because each one of us is this light embodying the vision. So that became the methodology of theatre of transformation. And what was really fortunate, your other question, was from the beginning, like these doors opened. University of Oxford, where I'd been a researcher, ever since I came, I narrowly escaped a very challenging situation in the war in Sri Lanka to come back to Europe. That was the other story we'll, I'm sure, get to. The University of Oxford embraced theatre of transformation, and we created an initiative called Enacting Global Transformation at the most normally conservative Center for International Studies. At the same time, the place where I had been a course director of this global security program, teaching the senior diplomats, military officers, etc., about global security transformation. They invited me and said, when you come to teach here, use your methodology. So I could get all these policymakers, who had come from the Pentagon, who had come from Afghanistan, fighting, from they would enact this, and the Geneva United Nations. So I could work at the United Nations with the senior leaders, and they could all feel that this enabled them, if they were coming from Myanmar, they were coming from Sierra Leone, to really feel what they were going through. And for those who were on the outside, to become human again. And how many times, whether it was senior UN leaders who would break down and cry and say, we are fighting about these stupid things like we don't have enough resources, whereas the stories you're telling us, people have nothing, and they're transforming everything. So we are going to quit being so bureaucratic and become human again. So it was extraordinary, the impact.
How beautiful, Rama. How beautiful what you're saying. And how hopeful and hope. I just feel hope with these stories, because it's like we can do it in another totally different way, and a joyful way, and playing and connecting through our hearts. And yeah, it's so beautiful. Thank you. And okay, I want to ask you, you mentioned Rising Women, Rising World when you were speaking. I want that you co-found with Cilla Worthy and Jane Houston, amazing women that we know. And what was the purpose? Because it's a beautiful name also, Rising Women, Rising World. Why it's important? What was the purpose of this movement? But more of I want to know, why do you think women should lead, and why it's important rising women?
What we strongly felt when Cilla and myself met Jean, this was in 2012, that the time had come, that we had gone past that first generation which we had to have, where women had to fight for the most basic things, the right to vote, the right to be treated as human beings, all of that, sadly, which is not yet accomplished. You know, we still have a long way to go in many parts of the world, yes. Even in those where you have the legal and political rights, but not freedom from violence and second-class citizenship. But we felt the time had come where women who had already done that could really create a world that works for all. So it would be women who didn't get caught up with those political struggles that often, sadly, men tend to get caught up in, who could bring men along to create this inclusive world for all. Unfortunately, I would have to say we had very strong aspirations, and the most powerful part of our movement was how it brought these women together. From my responsibility as a co-founder was how to make it really inclusive, mm-hmm. of all disciplines, all backgrounds, all cultures, all parts of the world. We weren't able, the time was not right, I think, to fully accomplish the vision, so I feel very happy that with our deep relationship with Jean, we've been able to do it, to take forward that vision through our more inclusive movement now. Mm-hmm. But I think that was a necessary bridge.
Yes.
And I realize that for all of us now, and I think that's what Rising Women brought out, that there are some women, like some of us, in the transformation movement who are still hoping that the old system can somehow be reformed. Mm-hmm. You know, somehow the UN, somehow the government, somehow the military industry can do a little less harm. And there are others of us who feel that those systems were created with a different mindset, with a different understanding of the world, and we will need to reimagine and create a world based on a new paradigm, what you said, of the unity and wholeness of life. And you can't get an institution based on the division and separation of life, our separation from nature, our separation from each other, our superiority over other people and life forms, to suddenly understand this. So I think that was part of it, mm-hmm. Which we will have to deal with as humanity. And some of us will need to focus on creating the new, and some of us do what we are called to do, which is helping existing systems to become more humane, mm-hmm. more inclusive.
And if you have to choose some simple elements, or maybe 3 elements, as you wish, or whatever, that we need to redefine, that we need to include or to learn to redefine the paradigms of power. What we do need to change, because you're an expert with people in power, and what we have to change in power to redefine power?
Haha, you know what? It's such a powerful question. I'm just thinking, should I share with a story? Because this was the story that really taught me.
Okay.
Yes?
Yes.
Are you ready? Okay. Good job. So we will have to go, this is what, in a way, I realized that, in a way, my whole life, I had been trying to redefine power. Because politicians believed it was always power over, power to dominate. So this was a story that, many stories, but this one really brought it home to me. Let me see if I can do it this way. Is it okay if I sit on the floor?
Yes, of course. A little bit the tape.
So this is, I need to take you to the slums of Mumbai. perhaps 5 kilometers away from where I grew up. And it was when I met these women, so many women, so I'm now thinking of all these women, which would be a quick story. Oh yes, I know which one, because I know which one I'll share. Because I've embodied so many of their stories who taught me how we can redefine power. So let me do it this way. Okay, let's go. Salam alaikum, namaste. My name is Mumtaz. You know, like Mumtaz Mahal, for whom Shah Jahan built Taj Mahal, one of the 8 wonders of the world. But my life was not the life of a queen. My father brought me and my brother, my brother and my mother from our village to Mumbai, to these slums. But then I don't know what happened. He disappeared with my brother, and my mother and I were left here. It was very dangerous for us to live as a woman and a child in the slums. All the men were trying to get to my mother because she was very beautiful. Finally, one politician, he kidnapped me. He locked me up in a small room, and he told my mother, if you do not become my mistress, you will never see your daughter again. I was 5 years old. What could my mother do? She became his mistress. But then, even though I was released from that place where I had been kept prisoner, I became a prisoner in my life. She kept me locked up so no man could see me in case my life became like hers. When I was 17, she married me off. My husband was very bad. He treated me so badly. But I had a child, a beautiful daughter. I called her Muskan. It means smile. I hoped that she would be able to smile because I never could. My husband would not allow me to go out of the house. But one day, I heard some women in the shacks nearby, in our slums. I did not know what they were doing, but they were smiling. They did not look like me. They looked independent and free. One day I took the courage, and with my baby I went to one of their meetings. That was how I found out about the Women's Federation. These women had all been like me. Hindus, Muslims, Parsis, all different backgrounds and cultures. They had all been beaten, raped, violated. But they had found their true power. It was like this. We would meet like this in a circle in one of our shacks. We would tell each other our stories. And that is how we would find out that our true power lies inside ourselves, not outside us. When we find our power inside ourselves, we realize that no one can take our power away. But then, we women decided, once we had our power, that alone we cannot do much, but together there is much we can do. So we formed an action task force. We would come together any time that any woman was being violated, anywhere in the slums. We would take our pots and pans, even our brooms, and go there to the shack where a woman was being violated. We would stop the man from beating his wife. We would go and wake up the police and tell them to do their job. But we realized this was not enough. We had to change the minds of the men. So we women ourselves trained ourselves to become psychologists. In our own shacks, we would bring the husband and wife together, and we would sit with them and talk to them until we found a solution, and the man could find a way to deal with his anger and his grief, to not take it out on his wife. So many of the men were transformed. And if they did not transform, we women found a way to tell them, leave your wife alone, do not torture her life, and leave our community. But we became strong with the help of our men. Then We did so many other things. The Women's Federation was like, you could say, a government without political parties, without manifestos and agendas, only working like every government should for the good of every person in our society, so no one would be left behind. Every shack in the slums of Mumbai became a place where we could put love instead of hatred. My own story is this. I found the courage to leave my husband, though my mother was very angry. I joined the movement of the Women's Federation, and I started fighting for peace. And there, I met a man. His name is Ashok. His grandfather had been a freedom fighter. He came from the community of untouchables. You know the untouchables. They are considered such that they cannot associate with others. But his people transformed themselves and they left Hinduism and became Buddhists because the Buddhists did not believe in the caste system. He was proud of being a Dalit, so-called untouchable, and a Buddhist. He had been fighting for the freedom of women since he was 17. We joined hands, and even though our families did not accept that a Muslim woman should marry a Dalit Buddhist, we married. It was actually my daughter Muskan who gave us the idea. She said, "Why don't the two of you marry so I can have a papa again?" We had another child called Kabir, because Kabir was a great poet who was Hindu and Muslim. He was claimed by all the communities and he made poems for peace. And I, who used to be locked up like this, never allowed to go out, I started fighting for the right of women to have the right to pee, to have our own toilets in the slums, so we do not have to pee outside where men can rape and violate us. Once we made a strike outside the government offices. We sat down like this and we said, "If you do not give us toilets in the slums, we will pee right here in front of your offices." They listened to us and we won the petition, and the Prime Minister started a national campaign of the right to pee. And I, Mumtaz Sheikh, I was recognized by BBC, British Broadcasting Corporation, as one of 100 great women in 2015. Together, my family is working for a united India and a united world. And we are proud to be part of the Home for Humanity movement, which is doing this for the whole world. Our home is a home for humanity. Thank you. That the lesson they taught me was, when you find your power within and your power with each other, then you have the power to change anything in the world. And these women are now in politics. They've created a grassroots leadership academy where the women like Mumtaz are the faculty. They've created this fellowship where the women come up with policy proposals to transform the government. It's extraordinary, and every shack is now a part of our movement, so it's very, very powerful.
No, it's amazing, totally incredible, so beautiful, Rama. Thank you so much. Okay, and just to before we have some questions, I would like to talk about Home for Humanity, because we in Hypatia really fall in love with this project and dream come true that it's Home for Humanity, that it's this. You tell about it. I don't want to talk about it. You please tell me how this was born. I know that you founded with Alexander Schiffer, your husband, how this was created. I know you have beautiful projects about home to do now, to the future. Tell me what is Home for Humanity, and why did you choose the word Home for Humanity?
So I mentioned this extraordinary vision and this need for a place. And what was very strange for me was the vision was so clear that this place had to be, I'd always thought in my life that if I don't live in India, I would live in Latin America or in Africa. I never dreamt that apart from studying or doing a few short jobs, I would live in the West. But the dream was specific, that this home had to be, this place we create, had to be in Europe, somewhere close to Geneva, and between Geneva and Lyon. And strangely, it was really the power of place which I didn't know before. Before that, I'd really been more dedicated to humanity. But the vision really helped me to become more inclusive of really the indivisible family of life, all nature. And so this place found me. I saw a picture and I knew I had to go there, though at that time I didn't have a great sense of intuition. And the minute I entered this place, I knew this is where this dream vision has to come true. But I didn't have the name. But at that point, I didn't know how this dream could come true. I was alone and I was giving up on my vision. But there was some kind of intuition that said, wait, stay here because the vision will come true. And 7 years after finding this place, Alexander walked in, and he will say that part of the story, that the vision literally started coming true through him, through his power of manifestation. I was lucky to receive the vision, but it really needed us together, the North and the South, the East and the West, the man and the woman. And this beautiful power, you talk a lot in Hypatia about balancing the male and the female sides, and I really recognized that with him. And the beauty was also when he came in, I could become more feminine because I'd become so much, I need to do it all myself. I could become the woman, the mother of this initiative, this movement, because he was there to manifest, I could be the Shakti more, the Gaia, because he could manifest. And in the beginning, it was him bringing his students home. And then we started, so it was very much place-based around our home. And then I would still keep going from there. So my work was really in the world, but he was able to work in the world and bring his world in. But mine was, this is home, I know I need to do something here, but still going out to all Afghanistan and, all these different places. But it was then the vision came together in 2015 that the name Home for Humanity fell into us, into Alexander, and then it felt really right. And the reason it felt right was that humanity contains the word unity. And we realized that all of our work, our desire for transformation, it's when we as human beings can realize that what our ancestors did for millennia, living in unity with all of life, respecting diversity and recognizing that we are all interconnected. That's what we had lost in the last couple of 100 years. And we needed to reconnect to that. So humanity is our, it's like the channel through which we can become human again by reconnecting and becoming really one with this unity with ourselves, with others and all life. And then we realized that everyone we were working with around the world, their homes, their school became a home, their enterprises became a home, or their enterprises started from home. So my world of peace and justice and governance and politics, and Alexander's world of societal transformation, educational transformation, enterprise transformation, became the source of this movement. And our home became like the nucleus, the integral home campus, where we continue to do things for our community, bringing our international collaborators there to meet, always as equals. So the villagers, the peasants who had never been out of our village, very small, very simple rural village, not very prosperous at all, a lot of poverty there. All the way to leaders, ministers and enterprise leaders, CEOs, come together as equals, share the same food, live together in simplicity with nature. And the beauty of Home for Humanity, it's what you said. It's once in a while we do something and we say, but I dreamt of that 23 years ago and it happened. How did that happen? Artists from around the world, from conflict areas are living together. Syrian refugee families are reunited and creating music together with us in the United Nations and talking about, treat us as human beings. It's just happening. And that's how our movement has really just emerged magically as a family of life working for a future for all life, where everyone has dignity. Beautiful that here there's a school for dignity, a center for dignity. Everyone lives in harmony with all life, and everyone is a co-creator. Whether you're a refugee, you're living in the slums or in the favelas, or you're a leader, you can co-create the future and transform the present and heal the past. So everything has really come together in this inclusive, interconnected way.
And you have 7 main Home for Humanities in the world, or the founders?
Yes, it's actually about closer to 10 or 12.
10 or 12.
Who are really, with whom we've worked for many, many years. They've been students, PhD students of Alexander. I've been like the women of Koro, who've been with us on this journey since 2015. So those are the founders, but now so many, either young people are saying, instead of looking for a job where I can't be myself and fulfill my purpose, and like Rama Mani many years ago, I have to leave behind my culture, my purpose, who I truly am to have a job. Rather, let me create a new livelihood which is based on my purpose, transforms my community, and I can just start from my own home. So many of our movements, it's someone doing it in the garage, someone doing it in their little place, and bring about transformation. Or it's leading institutions, universities, huge organizations which say, we resonate, we want to be a home for humanity. So it's really growing in these two different ways, or us finding an organization and saying, oh my God, this is a living home for humanity. We recognize and honor you, like the Tibetan Children's Village, which has been there 60 years, created by the Dalai Lama. And we say, yes, if all children could learn to live with compassion and respect for all beings, or the Navajo school, the Star School, service to all relations, which despite all odds is restoring the values of the Navajo indigenous culture into their students, we say, yes, we honor you as a home for humanity.
So any project who shares your values can come close to you and unite to this project, right?
Yes, we can recognize and honor them. They can come close to us, or they can say, help us to start something new with me and my group. And it's simply about inclusion, innovating a new way, transformation, and this whole life approach, that it's really all of us, all of life, not just human beings, but all life together. So each home becomes a part of the transformation, starting, of course, like the women of Koro, from the inner home, that really, it's in here, and when we fulfill our passion and purpose, starting where we live in our own homes, our communities, we can contribute, and each one contributes to the transformation of the earth, because we are a part of the earth.
Okay. And to end, we have a surprise for the ending, but what is the future of Home for Humanity? What is your new project? I don't know, we are going to talk with Alexander also about it, but I know you want to share something also.
Well, I'm sure he will share it in much more detail, but for us, now we feel that as the world is now at a critical stage, things are breaking down much faster. The division and polarization forcing you, you have to be with us or against us, forcing you to divide is getting bigger. That we feel the purpose, the mission, so to speak, of Home for Humanity is to be everywhere, to really reunite humanity so humanity can reconnect to our unity as a species in service to all life. So literally the vision of the One Home journey, again, like all the most beautiful things in my life and our life, really fell into us. It was like a universe saying, this is the time. So the One Home journey is this voyage, a collective voyage of humanity to build the future, to heal the past, to create every single person as a co-creator of the future, based on who they are, pursuing their purpose for the future and connecting with each other and helping each other, co-creating with each other. So within countries, across the continents and across the whole world, and using this power of 7, the United Nations has said by 2030 we will achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. But that doesn't relate to ordinary people in their lives. So are they excluded? But no, everyone can use these 7 years for this exponential power when we connect. And the power of 7, that you with your 6 friends or your family members can become a unit to multiply our power to bring about transformation. So we pray that this could be a way to unite all of us. So the home will now be not just in our place or the 10 homes that were the foundational members, but every single person's home, even if it's a refugee tent, even if it's a pavement, that person can become a part of co-creating the future, to create this future of oneness and dignity and flourishing. It's really about human flourishing in service of all life.
Perfect. So students and people here in Tecnológico Monterrey and all over the world can join this journey. You are going to be 7 years in a journey around the world, bringing Home for Humanity to different places, and you can join online to this project. And where people can know about this, you have a web page?
Yes, it's a very simple to remember web page. It's simply www.homeforhumanity.earth. So homeforhumanity.earth, and there you can find out about the One Home journey, the One Home University, which Alexander will talk about, the One Home Earth City, and how to join, and the beautiful programs where we really believe we'll be working very closely with the Monterrey Tech, but also with Hypatia Foundation for the women, for the earth, and the youth for the future, because I think the leaders for the future, for mañana, for tomorrow, would be a great inspirational partner in this journey too.
Okay, Rama, thank you so much for this interview. It has been really a pleasure to listen to you, to look at your eyes, to see your performance. It's such a joy and so beautiful. My heart has been opening and very moved. Thank you so much for being here in Mexico with us. And we really appreciate so much this opportunity of listening to you and listening to this really change agent for the future. It's so beautiful. And we want to, before we go to the questions of the students, we would like to hear, you have a poem. A surprise?
Actually, it just came to me now. Yes, let me do that, because I think it speaks just to what you said, and I want to thank Hypatia Foundation and you, Aleka. This is so important now. The work that you're doing, not the work you're doing, but who you are being while you do this, and the way in which you are creating and disseminating this multiplying power for our future. So deep gratitude to you and to beautiful, incredible Monterrey Tech, which creates a feeling of home, though it is 90,000 people. So a little, let's try. Yes, so that says the message for the future. It's a poem that's also in this little Gift of Peace poetry book, which is poetry about justice and peace and freedom, together with a great artist, William Kelly's paintings, who devoted his life to working for peace and freedom. It's an enacted poem, so hope that is fine. Nothing is just a poem, no. Okay. Need a bit of drama. And this place is perfect for this poem, you'll see why. That morning, the child woke up and pointed to the rising sun. "Look, Father!" His father looked at how the sky breaks slowly into crimson flames. He heard the eager thrill of the morning birds. He smelled the fragrant aroma of dawn. He felt the palm of his child on his cheek, as if for the first time. That morning, in the cabinet of ministers, he announced, "Stop the bombing. End the war." let us repair the damage we have done. Like a ripple on still waters, the murmur of change spread. Other fathers rose in boardrooms and chambers of commerce. Stop the selling of our souls for profit. Let us sow the seeds of care, and others too, in committees and meeting halls. Let us stop this madness of division and plunder. Let us regenerate our hearts and the earth. At that, guess what? The mothers stepped forward. In their arms, they carried designs for the future. On their lips, they sang songs of emergence. They joined hands with the fathers, and as the children and the animals danced between their feet, as the birds sang, and as the youth showed the way forward, they formed a steady circle around the earth, and they began to transform this divided world of I, me, and mine into an inclusive world of we, us, and ours. Yes, they began to build a home for humanity, for all of life. They undertook the one home journey to create the future by us, for all of us.